Hi everyone, and welcome back to the next diecast. For today's video, I'm going to be doing a comparison of the Maisto versus Beanstalk Group Ford Thunderbirds. I figured since I have both models now, I would do kind of a comparison video on them. A lot of ways they're very similar, but in a lot of ways they're also very different in terms of their overall quality and details and what have you. So first, we're going to go over some production details. So the Maisto version, which is this one here, was produced from 2001 until 2014. And it came in several colors, including the evening black that you see here, also a torch red with the same color interior, a light blue, and yellow and white. The yellow and white are actually rare, and the other three colors are much more common. Maisto also made the 1999 Thunderbird concept, and the differences, as I mentioned in my review of this model, are that you don't get the turn signals on the concept version and this third brake light, and also the steering wheel is slightly different. But they're pretty much the same in terms of overall details and whatnot. Now the Beanstalk Group version, production details are kind of, I don't know, maybe I would say sketchy because there isn't really that much information that's out about it. But Beanstalk made their version of the Thunderbird from, I would say, around 2002 until maybe 2004 or 2005. They made the 2003 and 2004 versions of the Thunderbird. Now, now for the 2003 versions, they made the 007 edition, which is what you see right here, and also the 007 edition that appeared in the James Bond movie, which had a matching coral top, whereas the one here has the white top. They also made it in light blue, called Desert Sky Blue, and dark metallic gray. And the 2004 versions of the Beanstalk, they're just scarce. They're very hard to find, and you're probably going to end up paying at least $100 for it if you are lucky enough to find one. And they came in a burgundy color called Merlot, and also a light green called Vintage Mint Green. So overall, I would say that the Maisto version is easier to find than the Beanstalk version. Now, in terms of prices, they vary greatly. You can find the Beanstalk versions. If you find the coral top version, as this one is a limited edition version, they only made 5,000. Beanstalk only made 5,000 with the white top, whereas the one with the matching coral top is much more common. So you'll probably be able to find the coral top and coral paint version the easiest. And prices vary between $35 and up to like $100 on eBay, depending on the condition of the model and where it's actually coming from. And other colors will command higher prices because they are more difficult to find. Now, in terms of the Maisto versions, if we're talking about the collectively the concept and the 2002 versions, they're much easier to find. And the concept seems to come up more frequently on eBay than the 2002 version. I also forgot to mention that Maisto actually did make the Mountain Shadow Gray 2003 color with the saddle color seats. But prices for the Maisto will vary greatly as well. You can find maybe a very beat up one with missing parts for as low as like $10, or a mint condition example in one of the rare colors such as white and yellow for up to $100, depending on who's selling it and the condition and whatnot. But the black versions seem to go for around $30 to $50. I got this one for, I think, $41, including shipping. And this one, this Beanstalk version I found at a hobby shop for, it was actually going to be $32, but they ended up lowering the price because the box was just so like beat up and stuff. I think I paid maybe $24 for it, which I think is a great deal. So let's go ahead and get into comparing the details of these two cars here. So we'll go ahead and take a look at the fronts first. Overall, the lighting, or the lights, they're pretty much the same in terms of details. They're probably the exact same part that's used. On the Beanstalk version, you do have kind of this line texture, whereas on the Maisto version, it's a little bit more pronounced, I guess, but that's really the only difference. And the pegs on the Beanstalk are very slightly smaller than the ones on the Maisto. But on both, the overall fit and finish is great. Now, for the Thunderbird badges you see in the center, the Beanstalk Group 1 is more narrow and is more, and I think it pops out a little bit more. The Maisto one also looks great, but I think it's a little bit too small. It should be a slightly bit wider badge. But overall, they both look great. They have the nice gold in the center and the turquoise on the wings. And the lower grills are pretty much the same, and they're very nicely done. They have the egg crate look to them, and they're actually fully perforated too. And with the fog lights, the Maisto fog lights I would say are actually slightly better than the Beanstalk fog lights. On the Beanstalk fog lights, the pegs are very kind of obvious, but on the Maisto version, they are not so obvious. But then again, on the Beanstalk version, you actually have that kind of line texture, and on the Maisto version, it's just kind of a plain colored lens. Now, I will say that Beanstalk Group is not a model manufacturer. They're a marketing company, but Mini Champs and Maisto are the ones who provided this model for them. And I say it, well, actually, the model was made by Mini Champs, but they borrowed some of the parts from the Maisto version. And you'll actually see that throughout as I compare these details. So I just wanted to say that, like, before I get well into these details here. If we take a look at the hoods and the hood scoops, on the Maisto version, you see you have a nice separate piece, but it isn't perforated, but it is kind of like a textured mesh. And on the Beanstalk version, you have kind of a less pronounced piece, but they both look good overall. And also the overall fit and finish of both hoods. On the Beanstalk version, it's actually a little bit better. You do have kind of a small gap, but on the Maisto version, you get a really big gap here. But because this is a black car, it's really hard to kind of see. But overall, they both look great. This is probably just a factory defect. Wipers, pretty much the same as are the windshield pieces, and the chrome quality on both is actually great. Nice and shiny on both of these frames here. Now the mirrors on both, it seems like both of these models, they have the issue of the mirrors like breaking off. I see a lot of listings on eBay and whatnot of these models with like missing or broken off mirrors. I don't know why that is, because they're actually very sturdy pieces. This mirror actually came broken off in the box when I purchased this model, so I had to glue it back on with super glue. But just be careful with that. But overall, the details of the mirrors are the exact same, and they're the same shape. When taking a look at the paint quality of these models, I would say that the Maisto is actually slightly better than the Beanstalk. On the Maisto, it's actually a much thicker and more shiny coat of black paint, as you can tell throughout on both the metal and the plastic parts. On the Beanstalk, the overall color and everything looks great. I mean, this coral looks awesome on the real car and on this model. But there is a slight hint of orange peel. You can see a little bit there, like where my finger is. You don't have that on the Maisto version. And the coat is, I think they might use like one less clear coat maybe or something like that, but it doesn't really like take away too much from the overall look of the car. I just think that the paint job on the Maisto looks a little bit better than the one on the Beanstalk. Now the details on the wheels on both models are great, although I will say that the Maisto tires are a bit too thin. You can see here that the Beanstalk is actually the right size and the right thickness. But that being said, the steering on the Maisto and the suspension are actually much better. On the Beanstalk version, it does have steering, but it's very kind of creaky and loud, and you actually have to turn the steering wheel in order to have the steering work. It's kind of hard to do with one hand, but you kind of get the idea. Whereas on the Maisto version, you can just do that with your fingers, and the steering works fine. And you don't really have suspension on this Beanstalk version. I'm not really too sure why that is, but you do get it on the Maisto version. But that's not really like a big difference or a big deal. These side kind of fender, I think people call them like hash marks or these vents on here. On the Beanstalk, there's actually separate metal pieces for each one that are also chrome. On the Maisto, they look very well done, but they're just not. They're actually just painted on. So overall, they both look very well done. But on the Beanstalk version, it's actually slightly higher quality because they're actually separate pieces on there. Taking a look at the rear of both of these cars, the taillights are pretty much identical in terms of detail. The Maisto version, you can see that the lower turn signals are a bit more, I would say, pronounced in color than they are on the Beanstalk version. But it seems like there's actually 2 pegs on these taillights, whereas on the Beanstalk, there's only 1. So in that sense, I think the Beanstalk taillights look a little bit better in that sense. But overall, the fit and finish of both, I think they look great. Now the badges back here, the Beanstalk badge is actually the more proper sized and shaped badge. You can see it's the same kind of size and shape as the badge on the front, and the coloring is actually very well done. On the Maisto, it's actually a slightly bit too high compared to the logo on the real car, but it does look good overall. It has the right coloring, like with the turquoise and the gold. But it should be a little bit longer and a little bit lower, but that really isn't that big of a difference. And the license plate frames on the Beanstalk version, this is done in chrome, and on the Maisto version, it is just painted in silver. So I think it looks better on the Beanstalk version. Exhaust pipes, pretty much the same exact thing, just kind of small and chrome. Though on the Maisto, it looks like they're actually straightened out better than on the Beanstalk. The Beanstalk ones kind of point downward. I don't know which one is proper, but that's just a difference there. Both models do feature plastic removable hardtops. We'll take a look at both here. So the Maisto, you just kind of pull off like so. On the Beanstalk, the process is a little bit more difficult. You have to kind of pull back the windshield a slight bit as you're pulling off this hardtop, because there are two little notches on the front here. You can see, and also the Beanstalk version will come with an additional tonneau cover that you just fit over the holes. And there you have a nice roadster look. Now on the Maisto version, it does not come with a separate tonneau cover, but instead you get a tonneau cover kind of built in with these kind of two gaping holes on there. It doesn't really look that great, whereas on the Beanstalk, the separate piece, it looks really well done, and it kind of finishes off the look of the car, I would say. But overall, I think the Maisto hardtop's easier to take off than the one on the Beanstalk, and it's actually thicker plastic. On the Beanstalk, it looks a bit too thin, but they both look great in terms of their paint quality, and the chrome window and the porthole windows look great on both. On the Beanstalk, you actually get this bonus little Thunderbird badge in the center. Now on the Beanstalk version, the front of the hardtop's actually mounted into the windshield with these two notches, so it kind of looks a little bit weird when it's off. But on the Maisto version, there are these two kind of gaping holes that they just kind of drilled into the sun visor. So I would say that this one, they did a better job with kind of hiding the fact that this comes on and off. Whereas on the Maisto version, it's kind of obvious with these big giant holes. But they both look awesome, like with the tops on and the tops off, I would say. So I would say in terms of overall looks with the hardtop on and off, the Beanstalk version looks better. And in terms of ease of use, I would say the Maisto version is better, because you don't feel like you're going to be like, bending the windshield too much on the Maisto, because you just kind of pull the top off. So we will next take a look at opening features. Of course, they both come with opening trunks. Maisto version is a little bit more stiff. They both kind of have the same shaped trunk piece. I would say on the Maisto version, the texture is actually a bit better. It feels more like kind of rough carpeting than it does on the Beanstalk version. That being said, the overall fit and finish of both trunk pieces, I would say the Beanstalk version wins because the piece is not loose. And also the underside of the trunk lid is actually fully painted, whereas on the Maisto version, it's only partially painted. Then again, the Maisto version, I think, has the better texture. It even looks like I'm carpeting, like from this angle, whereas on the Beanstalk version, it's a slight bit too shiny. Go ahead and close those up. We'll take a look next at the engine details of these models. Now, both these models come with identical engines in the front, so we'll go ahead and open up the hoods here. You can see that both are very well detailed. They have the Thunderbird V8 badge in the centers on this main block here, and it's also made of a raised up plastic, that V8 badge, and also those lines that are behind it, they're actually painted in silver. This one you do get a slight bit more detail, because these are actually painted white, these two components back here, and both do actually come with a little prop rod in the back. It's kind of hard to see with the black components in here. But this version should actually have a slightly different looking engine, because in 2003 on the real Thunderbird, Ford added some horsepower to it. So Beanstalk used the 2002 engine in the 2003 car. It's the same engine. They all came with 3.9 liter V8s, but just the overall appearance of the engine would be different on the 2003 model. So that is a little bit kind of improper, I would say, but it's not that big of a deal, because the engine detailing overall is well done, and it's not loose or anything like that. Same goes for the Maisto version too. The Maisto version does have the proper look to the motor. And then in 2003, like I said, they increased the horsepower, so the main block kind of had a little bit of a different shape to it. Now, the interiors of these models are where you will really notice the differences in terms of quality. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at those next. So the differences in terms of quality really does show when you take a look first at the seats of these models here. On the Maisto version, while the seats look great with this black and red, I love that combo, they are not the proper shape with the headrests. And they also, on the real car, they did not come with these stamped on badges. The badges were actually integrated into the leather in kind of a matching black. And the seat belt should actually be attached to the seat with a little kind of notch on the side instead of kind of going down into the floor like you see here. On the Beanstalk version, however, the seats just look incredible. They look and feel like the real seats. They look and feel like the real leather that the seats have. Even like the texture, the overall look of them just looks great. And the seat belt is actually properly done. The buckle won't come silver. I actually did that with like a silver Sharpie. But the Beanstalk wins in terms of the details on the seats. And the 007 edition did come with these white seats too. That being said, while the Maisto seats do look great, they're just not the proper detailing and whatnot. They do fold a slight bit, whereas the Beanstalk version seats don't. But I think the Beanstalk version wins with the seats because they just look incredible and they're the proper size and shape. If we take a look behind the seats, the Beanstalk version does have the printed on Thunderbird badge and the nice kind of leather texture on the shelf down here. On the Maisto version, the seats, also the seats are actually a bit too small and they're actually pushed kind of too far up. It almost looks like that this rear portion is actually a back seat, but it is not. Beanstalk, I think, did a better job with capturing the real look of the seats compared to the shelf because the seats are actually pushed back and they almost touch the bottom of this rear shelf. Whereas on the Maisto version, the seats are actually up a bit too far. And there should be a Thunderbird badge back here. That being said, on both models, they do a nice job with the speakers that you see on the rear shelf. They're done in kind of a textured mesh. It's actually harder to see on the Beanstalk because the seats are pushed far back. But I would say in that sense, the Beanstalk version wins with that detail. And also, if you look at the center console, Beanstalk does a nice job with this armrest here with the texture. It almost looks like you can open it up too, but you actually can't. And the parking brake too, and also these cup holders are bordered in chrome. On the Maisto center console, they do a nice job with the armrest, but there's actually a separate kind of storage compartment here. I don't know if that's actually proper to the real car or not, but the parking brake looks good. It's actually the same one that they use in the Beanstalk version, but there are no cup holders, which is kind of strange. I don't know if that's just because they used a part from the Thunderbird concept model, or if it should actually have cup holders and they just didn't do that. So that's kind of odd, but overall, this one has far better detailing with the seats and the center console and with this rear shelf. We'll take a look next at the dashboard and center stack details on these models. Overall, the detailing on both dashboards and center stacks on these models is just great. On both center stacks, all the buttons are actually labeled and painted on in white. It's actually a little bit easier to see on the Maisto version than it is on the Beanstalk version. And the dashboards, both dashboards have a nice texture to them, and on the Maisto version, you get that Thunderbird inscription on the side here. Nice kind of leather pattern on the red and the black portions, and same thing on the Beanstalk. You have a nice leather texture on the top part in the black, and then on the bottom white parts too. Now, the cool thing is that they actually have separate gauge clusters and transmissions on these models. On the Maisto version, you have kind of that retro gauge look and this different shifter, because in 2003, Ford actually included an optional select shift for the transmission, and the gauge cluster was actually changed to kind of a more modern looking setup. You can see they're actually separate gauges. If I can kind of focus on there a little bit. Whereas on the Maisto, on the 2002 version, they were kind of all integrated into one single setup there. Both manufacturers do a great job with the overall look of the steering wheel. On both, they have a nice Thunderbird badge in the center, as you can see, and also a nice texture. You even get the little horn logos and the little buttons for like the volume controls on the sides, and the tiny little airbag symbol underneath the Thunderbird badge. The Beanstalk version has the badge on top as it should be. The Maisto version has the badge towards the bottom. I think this should actually be on the top here. And the steering wheel on the Maisto version is a little bit too loose, whereas on the Beanstalk it is very, very tight, which is nice to see. It's not going to break off and whatnot. If we take a look at the door panel details, both companies, I would say, really captured the overall look of the door panels quite well, and the textures too. There's actually a different texture on the black portions than there is on the colored portions, and both do a good job with the silver look of like the brushed aluminum look where the door handle is actually located. And both have window buttons, they're just not colored in. And if you take a look at both models, they both also include textured floor mats on the floors too. I think on the Maisto version they're a bit better done than they are on the Beanstalk version, although the texturing on the Maisto is actually, I think the texturing on the Beanstalk is actually better. It's kind of a lined, kind of louvered texture, whereas on the Maisto version they're just kind of integrated into the floor with the same texture. So I think actually that the Beanstalk version is better in that sense. But overall, really with the interiors, you can really tell that the Beanstalk version is better in terms of overall detailing and accuracy to the real life car. So in that sense, I would say that the Beanstalk version interior definitely wins overall in terms of detailing. And the undercarriages of both models are pretty much exactly the same. They have the same exact exhaust system, same exact front end, even the same scale 118 font, because Mini Champs definitely borrowed the exterior mold for the of the Maisto for their model. They just added some improvements to the exterior mold, like they included one less peg on the tail lights, they included more accurate badges, and they did the proper wheels for the 007 edition. But overall, I would say in terms of price and ease of finding that the Maisto version definitely wins because it was made for a much longer time. And I would say in terms of overall detailing with the exterior and interior, the Beanstalk version, I would say definitely wins. Although I think both models are just great overall because they come in so many colors. And if you really are a fan of this car like I am, I would say get both versions. Because the Maisto version, they're the only ones that made all the 2002 colors, whereas Beanstalk, they made all the 2003 colors and a couple of the 2004 colors. But overall, both models are very well done, and it's kind of a shame that they're no longer being made in both cases. But I would say if you can find either one, then go ahead and buy it. I hope this comparison was helpful, and feel free to comment down below with which version of these you think is better, or if you own one of these or both of these. Thanks for watching.